Welcome to Lumon, a nimble new refiner.
Hello, refiners! Boy, oh boy, what a finale, right? This episode was absolutely packed with symbolic parallels. From Greek mythology like Orpheus and Eurydice, the Judgement of Paris and the Labyrinth of the Minotaur, to classic literature like Dante's Inferno and its 9 circles. Between Innie-Mark's choice, the red visuals, and that final song, everything points to one thing: eternal damnation. So in this video, I'm sharing my take on how the finale isn't just another piece of storytelling, it's a thematic spiral. Visually, physically, emotionally, symbolically, this is all Mark choosing to remain trapped in condemnation. So join me as I delve deeper into the final episode of Severance, Season 2, Episode 10, Cold Harbor. Let's get into it. Now, the way I'm breaking this episode down is by splitting this video into 2 symbolic parallel theory icebergs. We're going to be starting with the more recognizable surface-level parallels and then delving deeper into the hidden layers underneath. Because just like any good theory iceberg, we're working from the most obvious aspects down towards the more mind-blowing symbolic connections. The deeper you go, the more meanings emerge, and the darker it all becomes. So first, starting with layer 1 and the parallels to Orpheus and Eurydice. So we see Inie-Mark and Gemma share a brief emotional reunion. They embrace each other, they kiss, but of course, we don't have time for this, we have to escape. We see them both switch into their Innie counterparts in the elevator, going up to the 7th floor, with Miss Casey just asking, what's taking place? And of course, what's taking place is, we need to get you out of here, Miss Casey. So he obviously takes her to the stairwell exit and tells her to go through, which she does. But then we see Mark hesitate. And as he's hesitating, that's when Helly appears behind him and says his name, which is when he turns to look back at Helly. And it's in that moment where he makes a choice. He is choosing Helly over Gemma and over his outie's wishes. And this scene, this choice, this all parallels the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice almost exactly. In the myth, Orpheus played music that was so beautiful that neither enemies nor beasts could resist it. He fell in love with Eurydice, and they married, being briefly happy until the god Hymen, the god of marriage ceremonies, called to bless their union, warned their joy would not last. Soon after, Eurydice was bitten by a snake and died instantly. Devastated, Orpheus sang his grief, moving gods and mortals alike. Eventually, he decided to descend to Hades, to the underworld, to see his wife. Before Hades and Persephone, he played a song so sorrowful that Hades was moved to compassion. Hades agreed to let Eurydice return, but only if Orpheus led her out of the underworld without looking back. Orpheus was delighted. He thanked Hades and left to ascend back into the living world with Eurydice. But just before reaching the exit, plagued by doubt and unable to hear her footsteps, Orpheus turned to look, and Eurydice vanished back into the underworld forever. He tried to follow, but no living soul may enter the underworld twice. So the key takeaway here is, just as they're about to escape, he looks back. And because of that decision, she disappears forever. So of course Mark is Orpheus and Gemma is Eurydice. And that glance, the decision to look back, is what seals the loss. So it's a direct one-to-one execution of the myth, but obviously being a bit more twisted by the complication of Innie versus Inie-Mark. It isn't just one man making a mistake. It's a fractured separate part of himself where that other part has chosen to look back, and that's what causes the other part of him, the outie him, to lose her forever. But this moment isn't just about loss. It's also about desire and the devastating consequences of choosing it. Because when Innie-Mark looks back, it's not a mistake like the Orpheus myth. It's a decision, a purposeful choice. And that takes us straight into layer 2, into another myth playing out beneath the surface. The Judgement of Paris. So we see Innie-Mark, after seeing Gemma outside, being faced with the chance to leave Lumon with her, but instead he chooses to turn away and walk towards Helly instead. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, he is choosing Helly. And this moment mirrors another myth almost perfectly, the Judgement of Paris. So at the wedding of Peleus and Theseus, Eris, the goddess of discord, was not invited. In retaliation, she threw a gold apple into the celebration, inscribed, "To the fairest." 3 goddesses laid claim to it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Each represented something essential: power, wisdom, and desire. Paris, a Trojan mortal, was chosen to judge, and was offered a bribe by each of the goddesses. Hera promised him rulership over Europe and Asia. Athena offered him wisdom and unmatched skill in war. And Aphrodite promised him the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose desire. He chose Aphrodite. And in return, he received Helen of Troy. Helen, Helena, Helly. And with that choice, he didn't just gain love. He ignited the Trojan War. And in this episode, we've seen Innie-Mark make a similar decision. He too has chosen desire. But I suspect, just like in the myth, that choice won't bring peace or freedom. It will bring loss. And although there's no war yet, I suspect we're going to get, at least symbolically, thematically, a Trojan War level type conflict in season 3. But Mark isn't the only character caught in mythological parallels. While his story is one of loss and longing, Helly's arc is about defiance, about rebellion from within a system designed to trap her. And that brings us to layer 3, to another myth hiding in plain sight: Icarus and Daedalus. So we see Helly continues to rebel. She speaks out. She challenges the system. She tries to unite the severed workers. But we also know who her outie is. She's the daughter of James Egan, the architect of the very world she's fighting to escape. And that makes the myth parallels even more potent. So here's the story. Daedalus was a master craftsman, a symbol of wisdom, knowledge, and power. He built the Labyrinth on Crete, a vast, twisting prison meant to contain the monstrous Minotaur. It was so complex that even Daedalus himself could barely find his way out. After falling out of favour, Daedalus and his son Icarus were imprisoned inside the very maze he had designed. To escape, Daedalus fashioned wings of feathers and wax. And before flight, he warned Icarus, "Don't fly too high, the sun will melt the wax. Don't fly too low, the sea will drag you down. Fly the middle path." But Icarus soared upwards, overcome with the thrill of flight. The wax melted, the wings failed. He fell into the sea and drowned. And that drowning, something to point out, a little connection between Helly, Helena. We've already seen in episode 4 of this season, Irving tried to drown Helena, and then we saw Helena swimming in the last episode. So we've got this drowning water imagery, symbolism connection. But Daedalus was left to bury his son and curse the very brilliance that made escape possible. So now let us look again at James Egan. He's Daedalus. He's the architect of the Labyrinth. He, in quotation marks, created the Severance chip, which means he created the severed floor that exists. A system so intricately designed, so psychologically confounding, that even he may not be able to fully escape its grip. And that means that Helly is Icarus, fighting to escape a maze built by her own father. And right now in the story, Helly is still rising. She's still fighting against Lumon. But if her fate is to mirror Icarus, then that means it's not if she falls, it's when. So I suppose that's also a season 3 prediction I have. Because if Helly is Icarus, then she's about to fly even higher, even closer to the sun. So I'm thinking maybe Jame brings Helly out to the outside world to live in place of Helena. Maybe he'll treat her like the true heir to the Lumon company, one who earned the position because he sees care in her. And maybe Helly agrees, but it's just her pretending to align with him. Like maybe she sees this as her opportunity to take the whole company down from the inside. And that might be what her flight, her ascent is. The chance to fly too close to the sun. But obviously we know what this means. That the closer Helly gets to Jame, the more exposed she becomes. The closer she gets to the heat of Lumon's core, to the spotlight, to the sun, that will be the moment when the wax on her wings melts and ultimately she falls. And that would parallel the myth 1-to-1. Daedalus lives, but Icarus dies. So Jame Egan may survive, but Helly may not. But before we go further into Season 3 predictions, let us go down to Layer 4, to another symbolic parallel. This time exploring Theseus and the Minotaur and how it parallels the fight between Mark and Mr. Drummond. So we see that Innie-Mark is attacked by Drummond on the severed floor. It's sudden, it's physical, brutal, chaotic. Drummond slams Mark into the wall, he punches him. And Drummond is huge, he is a massive physically imposing man. So what's the Greek mythology connection? Well, there is a myth where King Minos demands a gruesome tribute. Every 9 years, 7 Athenian boys and 7 girls are sent into the Labyrinth, a vast winding prison built by Daedalus, as we just explored, only to be devoured by the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull monster born of lust and vengeance. The Minotaur doesn't represent intellect or cunning. He represents brute force, the violent guardian of a corrupt system that feeds on sacrifice. Now on the 3rd cycle, Theseus, Prince of Athens, volunteers to go in. He plans not to just survive, but to slay the monster. With the help of Ariadne, who gives him a thread and a sword, Theseus enters the labyrinth, defeats the Minotaur and escapes, leading the others to freedom. It's a myth of resistance, a story of entering the system, confronting the monster and breaking free. And in this episode, we see this exact parallel unfold. Drummond is obviously the Minotaur. He might not be cunning or philosophical, but he is a loyal, violent enforcer. He doesn't question the system, he just exists to protect it physically. His presence is pure intimidation, a human weapon shaped by Lumon. And Mark becomes Theseus. He's thrown into a sudden life or death confrontation within the severed floor, the maze of Lumon itself. He fights, he survives, he kills the Minotaur. But here's where the parallel deviates slightly. Because in the myth, killing the monster leads to freedom, and the thread guides Theseus out. The young are saved, and the cycle of sacrifice is broken. And while there are still elements of that, which we're going to get into in a second, but in this episode, Mark has slayed the Minotaur, yet the labyrinth still stands, the severed floor still exists, at least at the moment. Now, we have to mention though, Mark couldn't have defeated Drummond the Minotaur alone. So let's descend to Layer 5 and explore the mythical parallel behind the help he receives. So we know that when Drummond attacks Mark, it's not a fair fight. Mark is overpowered, overmatched. But that is when we see Lorne, the goat woman, step in to help. She's the one that initially gets the weapon from Drummond and ends up fighting Drummond herself to help Mark defeat him. So it is thanks to her for, in a way, giving Mark the weapon that allows him to take Drummond down to the testing floor to get to Gemma. So here's the mythological parallel. Ariadne was the daughter of King Minos, placed in charge of the Labyrinth, the twisted maze where ritual sacrifices were sent to die at the hands of the Minotaur. She was part of the system, deeply embedded in its cruelty. But when Theseus entered the maze, Ariadne makes a different choice. She betrays her role, she gives him a sword and a thread, and with her help, Theseus slays the Minotaur and finds his way out, saving the children's sacrifices as a result. So he only succeeds because of her, and that's exactly what we see in this episode. Lorne is Ariadne. She is a part of the system, literally tasked with raising and sacrificing baby goats as part of this Lumon Labyrinth bizarre cult ritual. And yet, when the time comes, she helps Mark. She is the reason he ends up with a weapon. And although she doesn't give him a thread to help lead him out, she instead helps him go deeper into the maze. So symbolically, the thread becomes violence, the guide becomes an accomplice, and the exit becomes a descent. She might not help him escape the labyrinth, but she helps him fight his way through it. And like Ariadne, Lorne breaks from her role, defying the orders she's been given, refusing to sacrifice the kids. Sacrifice the kids, the literal goat kids, and giving Mark a fighting chance. Without her, he wouldn't have survived the Minotaur. Just like Theseus, Mark needed Ariadne's help. Now, after all of those Greek mythology parallels, Orpheus and Eurydice, the Judgement of Paris, Icarus and Daedalus, Theseus and the Minotaur, and Ariadne and the thread, we're left with something that feels bigger than just a handful of references. They don't all seem to just reference Greek mythology. The story as a whole in Severance is behaving like its own Greek mythology. But more specifically, I think it's playing out like a Greek tragedy. Now, in ancient Greece, tragedy was one of the 3 core genres of theatre. It evolved from the worship of Dionysus, the god of wine, madness, and theatre. The great tragedy writers took epic myths and transformed them into emotional reckonings, stories of flawed choices, divine punishment, and human suffering. In tragedy, the audience doesn't just observe the downfall, they feel its inevitability. Everyone has their moment, every choice matters, and the cost is always personal. But here's where the connection to this Greek tragedy stuff gets weirder. Now, the word for tragedy comes from the ancient Greek word tragodia, and according to Aristotle, the word tragedy evolved from an ancient hymn sung and danced in honor of Dionysus. Now, the Greek word that I mentioned, tragodia, that breaks down into 2 further words. The first being tragos, which means goat, and oide, meaning song. So the word tragodia literally means goat song or song of the goat. And some interpretations suggest it refers to a song performed during a goat sacrifice or a song performed to win a goat as a prize. So tragedy literally equals goat song. So the goat connections continue. In Severance, we obviously have seen the goat department being tasked with raising and now sacrificing baby goats. So this is literally like Lumon's own theatre tragedy. And just like in ancient Greece, the goats are directly tied to tragedy, theatre, transformation, and the cost of knowledge. So in this Greek tragedy lens, we see that every character in Severance has a choice to make. Every moment of rebellion or desire or violence pushes them deeper into the maze. But by the end, there's no triumph. And that's what opens the door to the next layer of this finale. Because in Greek mythology, there's often one more key character lurking beneath the surface: the underworld. It appears again and again. Characters have to journey through it, not because they've fallen there, but because they're seeking truth, reckoning, or transformation. The underworld isn't just a place of death, it's a place of consequence, a space for reckoning with love, with memory, with fate. And in Severance, that descent doesn't stop with myth. It keeps going, it spirals down into something colder. Because this second iceberg isn't about mythology. It's about punishment. Not just tragedy, but condemnation. This isn't just a mythical fall. This is Dante's version of hell. So welcome to the second theory iceberg in this video, the symbolic parallels to Dante's Inferno. Let's start with the most obvious parallel in layer 1, the final song that plays at the end of this episode, which is Windmills of Your Mind, the Noel Harrison version. Its lyrics evoke a world of circles within circles, tunnels within tunnels, mirrors, labyrinths, and reels that never stop spinning. An endless loop where thought and identity collapse inwards. As the music plays and the ending scene pauses on Mark and Helly running under the red light, it shows them stuck in the same cycle of being trapped on the severed floor. Not escaping, not ascending, just frozen in time within the same never-ending system. And the lyrics echo exactly what we're seeing. Round like a circle in a spiral, like a wheel within a wheel, never ending or beginning on an ever-spinning reel. Like a tunnel that you follow to a tunnel of its own, down a hollow to a cavern where the sunshine has never shone. As the images unwind like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. These aren't just poetic metaphors. They're the architecture of Severance itself. The circles within spirals is Lumon's looping corridors on the severed floor, the recursive identity traps. The tunnels leading to tunnels, again, it's the severed floor, it's the descent into the testing floor, one level deeper each time. Caverns where the sun has never shone. We see that again, there's no windows on the severed floor, there's no sun, there's no light, no truth, only artificial structure. The reels and spirals, that's the endless repeating psychological loops. We see Mark's grief just on a constant cycle, Helly's rebellion. Stories of these characters that just keep repeating over and over again. Now, if this song gives us the architecture, the blueprint of Severance of hell, then Sisyphus gives us the feeling of it. So in Greek mythology, Sisyphus was condemned by the gods for cheating death. And what was his eternal punishment? To push a massive boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down, again and again and again. His suffering isn't fire or torment, it's futility. Endless repetition, meaningless effort. And this is the connection the song has to being like hell and Severance. As I said, in the song's lyrics, they say, as the images unwind like the circles that you find in the windmills of your mind. This isn't just about being trapped, it's about knowing you're trapped. Watching the loop unfold, seeing the full shape of it, and walking into it again. You're letting the circle, the boulder, keep spinning, rolling. We saw Mark had a choice. He could have followed Gemma. He could have left. But he didn't. He turned back. He chose to stay. And just like Sisyphus, Mark is embracing the cycle. He's not fighting against the loop he's stuck in. He's choosing to continue pushing it. And that's what makes it so tragic. The pain isn't that he's stuck, it's that he's choosing to be. So we've seen the psychological, cyclical trap, the endless loop, and the Sisyphus burden that Mark chooses. But this episode doesn't just imply that they're in hell. It shows us, visually. And that's where we now enter layer 2, where the final scenes are depicting Mark and Helly's descent into hell. They're bathed in red lighting because of the alarms. Mark is, of course, covered in blood. When they're running together, we obviously have all this sense of flashing warnings, the alarms, the danger. And we see the final end screen is red. For the first ever time, we're being presented with an end screen that isn't black or white. So they want us to understand this is different now. The red visual symbolism is important. And with that, in religious and literary traditions, red is the colour of hell. It's of fire, sin, wrath, divine punishment. It's literal visual coding for damnation. Like, red isn't the colour of victory, it's the colour of warning. And we see as Mark and Helly are running into the hallways, the more the red takes over the frame, up until the final shot, where there's no normal light left. It's all just red, which then obviously transitions into the bright red end screen. And of course, even the ending credits still keep up the red colour palette. And in the behind the scenes for this episode, Ben Stiller says about Mark and Helly running deeper into the halls of Lumon, which is literally describing them descending deeper into hell. So all of this red symbolism, especially the end screen ending credits, it is telling us that they're not escaping, they're just falling deeper into hell. So the world of our characters has turned red. Visually, structurally, symbolically, we're officially stuck in hell. But we have to ask, what got Mark here? What's the sin that sealed his place in this version of hell? And that brings us down to layer 3, to the second circle of Dante's Inferno, of lust. So as we saw in this episode, Innie-Mark had a chance to walk away with Gemma, which is of course what his outie wanted. But he decided not to go with her. He chose to turn towards Helly, walk towards her emotionally, physically, spiritually, and leave Gemma behind. But his decision wasn't strategic. It wasn't logical. It was based on pure desire. It is lust in its broader sense, which is emotional compulsion that overwhelms duty. So as a brief overview of Dante's Inferno, it consists of 9 circles, with each going lower and being worse than the first. So those who commit sins are assigned a certain level, a certain circle in hell, based on the sins that they committed during their mortal life. The worse the sin is, the worse the eternal punishment is. And the punishments are normally tailored to fit the crime, usually in a symbolic way. Now, there are a lot of parallels to how the first season of Severance represents the first circle of hell, of limbo. And then during the second season, there are also many parallels to how the story, at least thematically, is following the second circle of lust. I mean, that's been such a core theme throughout the whole season. All of our characters have been dealing with conflicts because of lust. And lust in this sense doesn't just mean sexual desire. It means being consumed by any overwhelming, irrational drive that causes choices to be made void of logic. And that is, of course, what we have seen Mark do at the end of this episode, by choosing Helly over his commitment to his outie and to Gemma. So I think it's safe to say that it is the sin of lust that pulls Mark into hell. But it's betrayal that locks him into damnation here. Which is where we now get to our final layer of this symbolic parallel theory iceberg, the final circle of hell. Now, I first explored the parallels between Severance and Dante's Inferno back in my episode 4 video. And I was saying, if season 1 represented limbo, and season 2 ties to the second circle, then we might want to skip to the end and ask, where is this story going? Which would be the 9th circle. The lowest level, the deepest circle of hell. And now in this finale episode, I think that's exactly what we saw. Now, the 9th circle of hell is for sinners who committed treachery, which is betrayal. It punishes those who betrayed the people they were closest to family, kin, lovers, countrymen. And the 9th circle is depicted as a frozen lake, called Cocytus, where the absolute worst sinners are punished with frozen ice, not with fire. And this frozen state symbolizes the coldness and finality of betrayal, a sin that leaves nothing behind. So the sinners, the traitors, are encased in the frozen lake, locked in place forever. And Satan himself is in this circle of hell, frozen right in the center of the Lake So betrayal is the ultimate worst sin in Dante's Inferno. It's the one that gets you condemned to the ninth circle. And Innie-Mark's choice here in this episode is exactly that. He's betraying Gemma, his outie, Devon, Ms. Cobell. We could even go further, his extended family, betraying Rickon. This one decision he's making to go with Helly instead of Gemma causes a mass betrayal. Just a ripple effect of betrayal. And this action would condemn his soul to the lowest circle of hell. So I think what we're seeing in this final bit of the episode is the storm of lust pulling him in to stay in hell, but then it's the act of betrayal that has now sealed his fate there. Hence the finality with all of the red visual symbolism at the end. And I have to say, I surprisingly called this in my episode 4 video. I'm going to put a screenshot of the video transcript up on the screen for exactly what I said, but I was saying if this show is following Dante's hell, then we're going to end up in the ninth circle due to a major betrayal. I mean, come on, that's pretty crazy, right? I'm not really one to gloat or show off any predictions I make that come true, but I mean, this one, I basically called this in episode 4, so just wanted to shout myself out there. Now, if we're going to be a bit specific about Mark's sin of betrayal, the ninth circle of hell is actually divided into 4 further individual rings, each punishing a deeper form of treachery. And I think this act of Mark's betrayal would fit in the first ring, which is called Kaina, and that's for betrayers of family. So the name of the circle is after Cain from the Bible, who of course killed his brother. Now the punishment in this level is that sinners are buried in ice up to their necks, allowing their heads to still move so that they can bow down. So Innie-Mark has betrayed his family, and therefore his punishment would be being buried in ice up to the neck. And what does this sound like that we've seen in the show? The painting of Keir pardons his betrayers, where we see the 4 MDR workers all buried up to their necks. So that image, for me, in hindsight, was foreshadowing this final betrayal that we've got in this finale. Like, it matching the exact internal ring of the ninth circle, like being buried up to their necks. That's crazy. That obviously, for me, is not a coincidence. And we see this exact same kind of visual symbolism foreshadowing throughout the entire show too. It's been telling us all along that Lumon is the ninth circle of hell. It's why the story, why Severance is set in wintertime, why everything is frozen, why the entire aesthetic of Lumon of this world is cold, white and blue. It's the blank white corridors, the bright white lighting, a place where time is almost frozen for severed workers. It's unmoving but constant. And as I said, Lumon is blue, like water, like ice. The frozen lake at the bottom of hell, Cocytus, it's a frozen lake. We literally saw that in episode 4. All of this world that we're in is Dante's ninth circle, just reimagined as a corporate workspace. And now I think we're seeing an even deeper horror. Betrayal isn't just something that happens here. It's built into the entire system of Lumon. It's required to survive. Every severed worker betrays a part of themselves. The split between Innie and outie, forever cut off. And it doesn't stop there. The managers are forced to betray parts of themselves as well. Milchick, Cobell, Natalie, they all have to suppress something within them, something human, something emotional and real, just to stay loyal to Lumon. They all have to turn their backs on truth, on empathy, on themselves. This is a place where betrayal isn't just a sin. It's a job requirement. It's in the foundation of the architecture. It's in the coldness of the lighting of the walls. It's in the emptiness of the screens and the stillness of the stairs. So this version of hell was never on fire. It was always frozen. Because betrayal doesn't burn. It freezes, leaving you numb. And now we understand. Mark didn't just fall into hell. He's been there the whole time. And now, he's chosen to stay in it. But anyway, those are just all of my thoughts and theories about the last episode of Severance Season 2. I've had such a great time covering this season with all of you, and I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who has joined me for these post-episodic videos. This channel is only where it's currently at because of you, because of your views, your likes, your comments, your subscriptions, and there's only so much I can verbally say to express my appreciation. So all I can say now is I'm truly so grateful to all of you watching this and for all of your support. And I appreciate each of you equally. Now, I started this channel just to share all of my thoughts and theories about the latest episode of Severance with you all. But I found that I'm really enjoying making content on this channel, and I'd like to keep making videos. So I do have a couple of post-season 2 Severance video ideas that I'm probably going to make, and just a heads up, they might look and feel a little different, maybe a bit more casual compared to these deep dive episodic breakdowns I've been doing. But we're just going to explore, test out different vibes, see where the creative flow takes me, you know? But looking forward more into the future of this channel, I have to think about what other topics I might cover. Now, I have to say that for me, there's only one other franchise, fandom, community that I'm into just as much as Severance. Any guesses? Any guesses? Now is your chance to make a guess. It's A Song of Ice and Fire. I don't know if that was like anticlimactic for you, but I'm curious if anyone guessed that. If you did, let me know in the comments, because I'm curious just how much crossover there is between fans of Severance and A Song of Ice and Fire. So I'm interested in maybe delving into the whole A Song of Ice and Fire world in the future. As A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms will be out later this year, and then House of the Dragon Season 3 at some point, those are definitely things I would be interested in making videos on. And of course, just in case it isn't obvious, I just want to state, on the record, I'm of course going to keep making Severance content in the future. As I said, I've got a couple of post-Season 2 video ideas, and then when Season 3 of Severance returns, I will be back to making Severance videos. But since I'd like to keep making content in the meantime, I obviously need to branch out a little. So as I said, my other one true passion is A Song of Ice and Fire, but I'd still love to hear from you. I mean, you're the one watching this, listening to this right now. What do you want to see from me on here? What do you enjoy about this channel? What brings you here? What keeps you here? Just let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I promise I will consider each suggestion equally. So thank you again. This has been so much fun, and I'm really glad that you were able to join me for this journey through Season 2. And be sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content, more of me, more of this channel, wherever it may go. And now, if you've made it to the end of this video, congratulations! You have now reached 100% on your file. A handshake is available upon request. And as always,
I love you, but now I must away, for there are others who need me around the world. Goodbye.